Greetings, everybody. Hi, my name is Elizabeth Wefel. I think almost all of you know me, but if you don't, I work at Flaherty and Hood, and I do the lobbying for the Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails organization. And before we get started, I always, especially since we have a small crowd, just kind of want to do quick intros. So I introduced myself. I'm going to throw it over to Carlin, and then if everybody, you can decide if you want to take your camera off or not to do it. But Carlin, if you want to introduce yourself, then I'll work my way around the Zoom cloud.
Thanks. I'm Carlin Ziegler. I'm the District 6 representative for Greater Minnesota, and I'm also the communications chair. And I am the parks director for Olmsted County Parks. And I will pass it over to Mike.
Good afternoon, Mike Nigber, Rochester Park and Recreation. I'm past chair of the organization as well, but welcome everybody.
Charlotte?
Hello, I am an individual member living in St. Cloud.
Welcome. Glenda? Jennifer?
My name is Jennifer Zemer, and I'm the administrative and accounting assistant for Goodhue County, and I also work with our parks department.
Thanks for joining us. Beth?
Hi, everyone. I'm District 1 representative for GMR PTC. And there I am. Hello.
Hi. Yeah, so Glenda's being camera shy today, but it's good to have you as well. Okay, so we've been doing these monthly forums every month because that's how one does monthly forums. Just kind of cover what's going on at the legislature, and I apologize for the short notice on this one. Just things have been so crazy, just we didn't get the notice out in time. But I want to start with an overview of what's been going on at the legislature since we last spoke. And right now it's what I would call go time. Each body has gone through and passed their omnibus finance and policy bills. Those are basically the bills that contain the state government budget, or excuse me, I should say that with the budget for the state of Minnesota. And, so agencies and whatnot, as well as a lot of them contain policy. And so the House has passed their version of all these bills. The Senate has passed their version of all these bills. And now what will happen is that they will kind of mush them together in a conference committee. The conference committee is made up of almost all conference committees have 5 members. So it's 5 House members, 5 Senate members, and then they kind of have to decide and negotiate what stays in the bill, what goes. So kind of some big work between now and then. It's been interesting. This has been a very long session in terms of just a lot of activity going on, a lot of record number of bills introduced, just a lot going on. But there is still talk, at least among some leaders, that they can adjourn early. I am very skeptical. But there are, I would call it substantiated rumors that basically leadership, at least in the House, has said that all the conference committees have to have their work done by next weekend, or they're getting their bills yanked, and it goes up to what they call the tribunal, which is basically sort of the leaders of both caucuses and the governor's office. I don't think they're going to do it that soon, but it's possible. I mean, there's some people saying they can get their work done by May 12th. I'm skeptical. You never know, but that's kind of what's happening rumor mill wise. So it's going to be very, very busy the next 2 weeks, at least. The drop dead date is basically May 22nd. The Minnesota Constitution requires that they adjourn the session by the third Monday after the first Saturday. So that is the 22nd of May. So the week before Memorial Weekend. And you may remember from past sessions, they don't always get their work done. Well, right now with the trifecta, with the Democrats being in control of everything, they will get done by then. I can't see any circumstances in which they would not get their work done, because it would be really, really embarrassing to be in control of everything and not get your work done, but we'll see. So we're kind of counting down till then. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to talk about sort of our priorities, but in the context of where they are as we head into conference committee. And I'm going to kind of do it basically by bill, sort of by omnibus bill. So the first one is the legacy. You know, sort of this whole group, our organization was founded originally to make sure that Greater Minnesota had its share of the legacy funds. And the way it has been divided up, even though it's not in statute, there's sort of been an agreement for more than 10 years now that 40% of the money goes to the metropolitan regional parks, 40% goes to the DNR, state parks, and 20% goes to Greater Minnesota Regional Parks. And that is administered by the Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails Commission. You know, that sort of agreement has held, and it is one of the things that we always watch for. But that piece seemed to go really smoothly. There was no controversy over the 40-40-20 piece. One of the other funding pieces we also always watch for in the legacy is we try to make sure there's no carve outs. And by carve out, I mean, basically some legislator gets the idea that, hey, there's this park or trail in my city that really needs to get done. So I'm going to introduce a bill and we're going to just carve out a piece of that legacy fund for them. That has happened or attempted to have happened a number of times, and this year was no exception. I'm not going to pick on the city because it wasn't their idea, but their legislator and their lobbyist decided it would be a good idea to try and pull money away from the legacy fund. And they went so far as to even get a hearing in the House, but thankfully Chair Lilly and the members of that committee recognized that, you know, this whole sort of agreement and this whole thing works when we actually go with the recommendations of the commission. So no carve outs happened. And so actually, I think we got record amounts of money going into the legacy to be funding grants. And so again, that's a reminder to all of you, if you have designated parks and trails, that sort of application period is open now. So go apply for that money. And if you don't have a designated park and trail, think to yourself, is there something we can get designated? And go talk to Renee about getting that done. But, you know, very important. With respect to the legacy bill, a couple other things. There are some extensions in there. There's 2 different park and trail projects that had received money through legacy over the last couple of years that for a variety of reasons couldn't get all of it spent in time. So there is language that extends it for them. We've also run into this strange sort of thing where the DNR has been telling the commission, you have more money than you've spent. And the commission's like, we don't think so. We think we spend everything we got. But the DNR is like, no, you got more money. So they're trying to resolve that accounting issue. And so we are also putting language in there that would, if we indeed do have this $1 million that hasn't been spent that they claim, we'll push forward the availability date. Obviously, the commission will work to make sure that money gets spent promptly. But, you know, we're not arguing with the DNR, but we just, you know, haven't seen the numbers to prove the extra money. We'll take it, you know, and we'll do what we need to do legislatively to make sure we keep it. But it's kind of an odd situation. So, but that language for both the specific projects and that has been added in both the House and the Senate. There's some differences there, but I think that we should be okay with both of those pieces. Excuse me, I should say that the general extension did not make it in the House bill, but that was an oversight, and we see no reason why they won't take it. So I think we're good there. There is another provision that was included in the House bill that we didn't seek, but we're not objecting to. And what that would do is make tribes eligible for grants under out of the Greater Minnesota legacy pool. We did not, you know, it wasn't something we asked for, but on the other hand, we don't object to. At times, our organization, Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails, has had tribal nations as members. We don't have any at the right now. We'd welcome them in the future. We think that, you know, as valid forms of government who are located in Greater Minnesota, they should also have an opportunity as long as, you know, they sort of commit to the, you know, they would be subject to the same rules as everybody else. So we are using that, though, as a reminder to the legislature in general, like, okay, you're adding this in, you need to give us more money. So one thing that did make it into the legacy bill that we really, really don't like is there is a provision that would prohibit legacy funds to be spent on any project where eminent domain has occurred. And it doesn't matter if eminent domain occurred 30 years ago. You have a park or trail, it's designated, and it used eminent domain at one point under this language, you wouldn't be eligible for legacy funds. This is a problem for us. It's a problem for others, like the metro area. We've been speaking out a little bit more loudly about it than the metro has. I'm kind of trying to light a fire under them to also be a little bit more aggressive. It's in the Senate. It's not in the House. It was added as an amendment on the House floor. It was crazy how quickly it happened. There was a senator from the Rochester area who proposed it as an amendment. There was no discussion, voted on and off. I was literally standing outside the door, texting legislators, trying to get a hold of as many as I can, telling them not to vote for it, but get voted on. We are trying to get it stripped out. I'm hoping we can, but it is something, again, that we're going to need to deal with. Is there any, I'm going to move on to the next bill, but are there any questions about the legacy bill before I move on? Those are, like I said, those meetings are in, they were the first conference committee to start meeting. Unfortunately, there's not much of a presence of Greater Minnesota on those, but I still think that we will be doing okay. In fact, I don't think there's, I'm trying to think if there's any Greater Minnesota off the top of my head. I can't think of any Greater Minnesota legislators on that conference committee, which is, Representative Backer, who's a Republican, is the only Greater Minnesota person on there. So a little unusual. There is a little bit of sort of, I would call it internal controversy with respect to that conference committee, because for reasons that none of us understand, normally to be on a conference committee, you always have the chair of the respective committee, often the vice chair. This particular conference committee has 3 members from the Senate who have never sat on legacy. And this is really ticking the people in the House off. I don't think it affects us so much as it affects some of the other sections of the legacy, but it's very interesting. Okay, now I'm going to move on to the Omnibus Environment Bill, which has a number of different things we wanted and also left out a couple things that we wanted. So I'm just going to point out that the first thing that it did include or did not include, one of our goals this year was to try and get permanent funding for the commission out of the general fund. And I think we had a really good go at this. Senator Housechild was our author in the Senate, and he was just a rock star, very supportive, got a lot of stuff done for us. Unfortunately, the challenge we ran into, and this is a challenge we're always running into, is that, each body has what are called targets. And this is the amount of money they're allowed to spend. And this year, because there's such a large budget surplus, but so much of it is one time, almost all of the target that the environment committees got was one-time money. So there was very little that they could use sort of on an ongoing basis. And unfortunately, despite our best efforts, and there were a lot of efforts by me, by board members, by non-board members, by, Senator Housechild and others, but unfortunately it didn't happen. We will continue to push that issue and try to look for more funds for Greater Minnesota. We didn't get that, but the one thing I will point out is that we did get, at least in the Senate version, some added money available for Greater Minnesota, and that is the lottery in lieu. If you are not familiar with it, basically there's this concept of lottery in lieu fees, and this is the amount of money that when you buy a lottery ticket, there's no sales tax. So the state is missing out on sales tax that would have been charged on those. So the lottery is required to sort of pay the equivalent back to the state of what they would have received. And that's called lottery in lieu. And that money has been statutorily sort of designated to a number of different organizations, including the metropolitan parks and the state DNR parks. And so we, working with Senator Housechild, we didn't even have a bill on this. We basically kind of forced it through in committee. In the Senate version, at least, we would now have a designation for 2% of lottery in lieu. Would we like more? Sure. But is it a great start when you aren't getting nothing? Absolutely. So one of our top priorities between now and the end of session is trying to keep that in the Senate bill. Our biggest challenge is that we have the chair of the House Environment Committee really just doesn't like Greater Minnesota generally. And he was opposed to this. So I am hoping we're able to push forward on this, but that is probably our top priority there. So, so that's one big thing in the Senate bill. Another big thing, a big thing in the environment bill. Another thing that is popping up, I think it is going to be in the environment omnibus bill, but it's not entirely clear, is the LCCMR bill. And excuse me for a second. What that is, the LCCMR bill is basically recommendations of how to spend money from the Environmental and Natural Resource Trust Fund, which is basically the proceeds of the lottery. And a certain amount of that is dedicated and is recommended by the LCCMR. And it has been, at least, for the last 20, 30 years, a pretty good source for, many of our members and others for funding for parks and trails in greater Minnesota. And, it's a good source for local parks and trails grants. That's something that we've made a priority of pushing for. And this year's recommendations from the LCCMR include $3.8 million for the local park and trails grants. And that is, again, very important because it includes projects for many of our members. And we really, so it's very important to us that they get this done. The thing we are worried about, however, is that there is also language in there in the House version, not in the Senate version. It got pulled out in the Senate version, that would require a 50% match for any project that is a capital project, which could include a park or a trail, that is receiving funding from the LCCMR. We are very concerned about this because, as you know, there's not a lot of resources for greater Minnesota out there for our parks and trails. And our worry is that if we, require that 50% match, there's just not going to be a lot of money left, or there's not going to be many cities or counties who are going to be able to apply for that because it's just hard to come up with that money. So we are pushing hard. We are working with both the conference committee members as well as, Senator Houschild, who helped us on that, and others to try and make sure that that stays out. Other than that, there's a variety of different smaller things that when we do an end of session, sort of wrap up, we'll get into. I think, there's proposals for money for skate parks, other programs that may benefit our communities, money for the Parks and Trails grants and the environment bill as well. So that's the other things that we'll be watching for as we move forward. Any questions on the environment bill? Well, those are the two big bills that affect us, but I'm also going to mention a couple other things. I will mention bonding. I think when I last spoke with you, there had been some, there had been talk last month about getting a bonding bill done, and it failed on the House, on the Senate floor. And there continues to be both in front of the scenes and behind the scenes discussions about bonding getting done. I think that there will be another run in a bonding bill. I think the question will be, is it paid for with cash or is it paid for with general obligation bonds? And that the reason that question is out there is that you need a super majority to pass the pass a bonding bill. Basically, the reason for that is that a bonding puts the state in debt. And so sort of the thinking of the people who wrote our original Minnesota Constitution was that if we're going to put the state in debt, we want more than just 50% to approve it. So, the good thing about that supermajority requirement is that you get a broader bill that's more focused on the entire state. And you get people from both parties. And there was a version of a bonding bill that was passed earlier this year by the House. They had 22 Republicans voting for it, but it went over to the Senate and they got more than 50%, but they didn't meet the supermajority threshold because not a single Republican voted for it. Republicans said they thought it was too early. And they had a kind of I would call it almost a shifting list of demands, what they wanted in exchange for a bonding bill. And since then, there hasn't been any further votes on a bonding bill. We hear rumblings of conversations here and there. The Senate GOP has still said they're not planning to vote for one unless certain things happen. I don't know if they're going to hold to that promise through the end of the year. The Democrats, meanwhile, are putting together their own version of a bonding bill that is paid for strictly with cash. And it probably will have a lot less projects in Republicans' districts, which could mean much less projects in greater Minnesota, but we'll see. It's kind of a political mess right now. I'm hoping that they can come through and reach a bipartisan solution in both Senate and House to get a bonding bill done, because I think that's really important for the state of Minnesota, and it would ideally contain money for parks and trails. Any questions on bonding? Okay, well, those are the main issues we cover. I do want to mention one other issue. I see we've got our friend from Rosa on here, and this issue was raised at I think one of the last forums, but there had been legislation out there that would put restrictions on the use of certain off-highway recreational vehicles, which I know up in northern Minnesota is a big deal. It's very much a part of the tourism economy. And so a number of our members from up there are very concerned about that. It's not something that GMPT lobbies on, but I did sort of as a favor want to make sure that I knew where that was at. And I did look up the policy bills, and as far as I can tell, none of that went anywhere. So I don't think any of those restrictions are going forward. But again, I'm not the expert, but at least my brief scan of that is what that said. So that's all there is on the substance. Kind of the questions of what's next and what you can do. So like I said, next week, they are going to continue to meet in conference committee. And we're going to be putting out an action alert Monday because we need people's help in reaching out to legislators on the Environment Conference Committee, encouraging them to keep the money in the lottery in lieu for Greater Minnesota as part of that bill, and to remove the restriction on remove that 50% match. I think it's too hard to sort of tell you what to write in an action alert. So we're going to write something up and send it out to all of our members. But that's really the next thing that's going to happen. We'll be also sending out some updates, and we'll do a wrap up forum or something, after we're all done. But it's going to be a busy couple weeks. But that's all the prepared comments I have. Does anyone have questions about anything that's going on with the legislature they want to ask me? Quiet group today. Okay, well, if that's it, I think that's the rest of the forum. So I really appreciate you all joining. You can always reach out to me if you have any more specific questions. So thanks for joining us. And thanks, Mike. Bye.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks,
Thank
Elizabeth.
you.
Yep, bye.